What if I told you that a major geopolitical event, a full-blown international crisis, wasn't decided in some high-tech war room, but by watching social media videos? And what if I told you a president was kidnapped, not over policy, but, well, over his dance moves? It sounds like fiction, I know, but this is the unbelievable story of how the United States created its very own crisis in Venezuela. So, January 3rd, 2026, U.S. forces go into Venezuela, and they grab the sitting president, Nicolás Maduro. I mean, this is an absolutely unprecedented move. It stuns the entire world, and it leaves everybody asking one simple, completely bizarre question.
Yep, you heard that right. A dance. This massive international incident, this huge geopolitical gamble was apparently kicked off because a president just couldn't stop dancing. It sounds nuts, I know. Okay, let's dive into this. To really get this, you have to throw out the textbook on foreign policy. This story is all about personal pride, rivalries, and, well, pettiness. The reasons behind this whole thing seem to have way more to do with personal slights than national security.
You see, for months, President Trump had actually been resisting calls for any kind of military action. But then his advisors reportedly started showing him these videos. Again and again, videos of Maduro dancing, looking totally carefree, to a remix of his own voice. It was just this constant public show of, well, of not caring about American threats.
And that's how they reportedly framed it. It suddenly wasn't about oil, it wasn't about democracy, it was about respect. The advisors allegedly convinced Trump that every one of Maduro's dance moves was a personal insult, a message to the whole world that he wasn't feared, that he wasn't taken seriously. But believe it or not, the dancing wasn't the only trigger.
And here's where the story takes another really weird turn. Trump's anger was also aimed at Maria Corina Machado, the Venezuelan opposition leader who had been begging the U.S. to step in for ages. You'd think she'd be his biggest ally in all this, right? Well, you'd be wrong.
So, get this. According to sources close to the White House, Trump really wanted the Nobel Peace Prize. So when the committee gave it to Machado instead, he apparently saw it as this huge personal offense. She even offered to share it with him, but it was too late. Her ultimate sin, as they called it, was just accepting it in the first place.
So you've got this powder keg of personal anger. How does that blow up into a total strategic meltdown? Well, the second Maduro was kidnapped, the plan, and I'm using the word plan very loosely here, it just started to completely fall apart.
I mean, just look at this timeline. Machado spends months pushing for the U.S. to get involved. She finally gets her wish. Maduro is gone. And then, literally one day later, Trump yanks the rug right out from under her. He dismisses her in public and throws his support to her rival. The betrayal was just, wow, swift and total. And this was the knife in the back. After basically using her as political cover for the whole operation, Trump comes out and says that Machado, this nice lady, just doesn't have the respect to lead. For the opposition, it was an absolute gut punch. But was it just about personal anger, or was something else going on behind the scenes?
Well, it turns out there was a cold, hard, strategic reason. The CIA came out with a new assessment, and it was brutal. It basically said that only Maduro's inner circle, led by his VP Delcy Rodriguez, could stop the country from totally collapsing. Why? Because the Venezuelan military saw Machado and her allies as traitors for supporting the kidnapping. Putting them in charge would have meant a full-scale American ground invasion, and that was a political nightmare Trump was not about to get into.
Okay, so if the plan wasn't to install the opposition, what was this all for? The obvious answer, the one everyone assumed, was oil. But as we're about to see, that grand prize of Venezuelan oil, it was never really on the table to begin with.
300 billion. That's the number that fueled the whole fantasy. Over 300 billion barrels of proven oil reserves. On paper, it's a treasure chest that could make any country ridiculously wealthy. But that number, it hides a much more complicated and expensive reality. And here is that reality. $133 billion. According to industry experts, that's what it would take just to get Venezuela's oil sector back on its feet. And it would take until at least the year 2040 to do it. The entire system has just been destroyed by years of neglect. This table really lays it all out. The White House was dreaming of a stable, friendly government welcoming them with open arms. The reality? Deep instability and a military that hated them. They dreamed of just turning on the taps, but the infrastructure is in total ruin. And the oil itself, it's heavy, it's sulfuric, it's expensive to refine, and all this at a time when global oil prices were too low to make such a huge, risky investment worth it. You know what the most incredible part is? The administration never even bothered to ask the people who would actually have to do the work. A CNN report said it flat out. American oil executives were not interested at all. They saw Venezuela not as an opportunity, but as a giant black hole for their money.
So all of this leads us to the final disastrous outcome. With no real plan for the opposition and no real prize in the oil fields, the United States was left holding the bag for a crisis it completely created itself.
So what did America win in all this? Let's see. They inherited responsibility for 31 million people on the edge of starvation, a military that despises them, a multi-billion-dollar repair project with zero investors, and an administration that is literally making things up as they go. The only clear success? They got one guy to stop dancing on social media.
Just hours after the kidnapping, journalist Thomas Friedman summed it all up perfectly with that famous phrase. By taking Maduro, the U.S. made all of Venezuela's problems its own problems. You break it, you own it.
And you can see them scrambling. The administration is now reportedly trying to figure out how to pressure or even pay U.S. oil companies to go into Venezuela. They're basically considering a corporate bailout to fix a foreign policy screw-up.
In the end, this is really a story about what happens when foreign policy gets intensely personal, when political goals have absolutely nothing to do with economic reality. It was an impulsive act born from ego, and it created this huge mess with no obvious way out. And it just leaves you wondering, if the official reasons make zero sense, who else might have been whispering in the president's ear, pushing him toward a disaster they knew was coming?